Hello, and thank you for tuning in to Starting Small. Today, I'm joined by Chris and Jonathan of Trainual. You guys, thank you so much for taking the time.
Yeah, thanks for having us.
Happy to be here, Cameron.
Yeah, so to kick things off, I'd like to start out with your upbringing. Both of you guys, where did you grow up? And then what would you say your childhood was like?
Where do we start? Should I start, Jonathan? Because I was around before you.
Yeah, you can cover the 3.5 years before I came into existence, if you want.
All right. It was the best 3.5 years ever. Like, so much good stuff. No, I'm kidding. So Jonathan and I obviously are brothers. I don't know if that was mentioned, but we've always been tight as we've grown up. We've had a lot of different business ventures together. We, as kids, lived between Boston, Massachusetts, the Chicago area, in Naperville, Illinois, and then Charlotte, North Carolina. So we as kids did a little round trip from Massachusetts to Illinois. That's where Jonathan was born. Then North Carolina, back to Illinois, back to Massachusetts. And that's still where Jonathan is today. And I live out in Arizona now.
Awesome. Well, it sounds like, yeah, similar upbringing. So out of that, did you guys have similar interests, or what were those interests growing up? Would you say like athletics, or what did that look like?
I'd say Chris was always a little bit more into the athletics. Like both of us played, baseball and basketball and tried, soccer and different things along the way. Our dad definitely put us in a lot of sports and coached teams, and that was a big part of our childhood. But Chris ended up continuing more down the path of kind of the all-star athlete on the traveling sports teams and the varsity basketball team and all that. And for me, in middle school, high school, I kind of veered more down the extreme sport route. The creativity inside of extreme sports really spoke to me. So did the adrenaline.
So yeah. Jonathan had the creativity of extreme sports, and I had the organization of organized sports, and that was a foreshadowing of our roles here at Trainual.
I love it. I love it. So carrying on to school, where did you guys end up going to school then? Did you eventually move away? So Jonathan, I know you're back where you started, but I'm curious, what did schooling look like?
Yeah, Chris, you go first.
Yeah, so I went to Bentley University outside of Boston. It was a business school. I, at the time, had a video production company that I started when I was 14. Jonathan worked with that business as well. And when I decided to go to college, I wanted to keep my video business going. So I picked a company, or I picked a school that was still driving distance from my house because my office was in my basement at home. So I needed to get back and be able to fulfill the orders and the production equipment and all that stuff. And so I went to school not too far from home.
Awesome.
And then for me, I wasn't too far from there. I was down in Rhode Island at Bryant University. But I also did a semester abroad out in New Zealand at the University of Otago. And I was always drawn to travel and adventure. And so while I went to a business school and studied, marketing and psychology and those kinds of things, I, after school, ended up moving out to Aspen, Colorado, to Los Angeles, spent about 5 months traveling through South and Central America, filming a documentary. And for most of my early mid 20s, I was just kind of a little bit more nomadic, traveling the world, chasing big mountains and amazing stories. And then it wasn't until we launched Trainual, I actually did a little stint out in Arizona with Chris, getting this off the ground. And then I moved back home to set some roots down here where we grew up.
Wow.
Jonathan was hitchhiking as a nomad. My only travel was through all-inclusive resorts.
Oh my goodness. So yeah, Chris, during this time, so Jonathan was, busy traveling with film production. And Chris, I'm curious at this time, were you doing the film company at this point all the way until Trainual, or what did that look like?
So I had the video company for 12 years. And so Jonathan's stint in LA was running our LA office out there. He had, managed productions, traveled around the country. I stopped doing the production side of it and focused more on the business development and the operations side of the company. And then after 12 years or so, ended up selling the business. So I had my director of operations take over as president of the company, took everything off my plate, stepped back and acted as an owner. And during that process, I was looking for, what am I going to do next? And I had joined these entrepreneur groups and had friends that said, well, why don't you come work at my office for 1 day a week or 2 days a week? And you could totally help me with this new project, or, just change whatever you want, talk to my people, institute new systems. And so I had so much fun doing that, kind of packaging the knowledge that I learned in my business and taking it company by company to try to make other businesses better. So when I sold my video company, I went all in on consulting, and it was inside the consulting firm that Trainual was born.
Interesting.
And it was
I'm
around
curious.
that time Chris was kind of exiting the video company there. That's when I moved to Aspen, and I did a little tour as a snowboard instructor and a bartender just to have a blast for a year, but prep for my big documentary travel trip. And and then I kind of pursued a life of adventure media and building somewhat of an agency in that world, and being a sponsored athlete and all of that. And so for those years while Chris was building his operations consulting firm, I was telling brand stories through the outdoor industry.
Wow. I mean, if you don't mind, dive kind of deeper into like what that looked like. That's a really cool, neat part of the story.
Yeah, I mean, it looked like me maxing out all my credit cards and living in the dirt through South America to capture an incredible story that I could come back and spend my nights and weekends cutting together and release a film as like my first footing in that industry. And then from there, I was able to stand on the success of that film. It was called Between the Peaks, and build relationships with our companies and different brands, and then get paid to go do mini docs and product launches and test gear and all sorts of stuff, and do amazing things around the world and in some of the wildest places you can imagine for a while. And so it's a funny pivot point in the story where a lot of people are like, well, why would you give that up? That's like a dream kind of job to go do SOP software. And so at the time I just got back from like a month in Alaska climbing Denali, and was pretty burnt out, honestly, on the expedition space and on that agency lifestyle. And it was affording me just that, an amazing lifestyle, but not so much scalable revenue to live off of. And I didn't honestly at the start think that I would be doing Trainual this long term. It was just for that period of time. I would help Chris's clients a lot with their brands, their marketing, their websites, etc. He would like tap me when he needed help with that creative side of things for those people that he was working with. And so he and I started talking. I was like, yeah, I can help with that for Trainual. And so I went, just to help get the brand off the ground and build the website and the sales funnels and the advertising assets and videos and all of that. And we just had so much fun working together again, because we hadn't in like 5 or 6 years since that video company. And now here we are, almost, I think next week is 7 years later since launching Trainual together. And it's just been an incredible journey.
Amazing. Chris, I'm curious, kind of the shift with Trainual. And so you're doing consulting for all these different companies, but at what point did you realize like the actual genesis of Trainual, and how did that shift into like an onboarding service at that point? I'm curious.
Yeah, so in 2014, I had a retail store client of mine that was a very seasonal kind of business. They were across the street from a university. And so every semester, they would hire a new batch of students that would work in the store. And then the semester would go by and almost 100% of them would be gone. And they'd bring in a new batch of people and have to train them on how to make T-shirts and how to check people out at the point of sale system. And they had a 60-page training PDF. And it felt like the worst way to train a college kid. And so as a consultant, I'm looking at this and saying, how do we design a better system for this? And at the same time, I had other clients I was working with. I had a, electrical contractor, and I had a printing broker, and I had all these businesses, and thought everyone has a brand and a story and a culture. Everyone has roles and responsibilities. Everyone has the stuff you train your new people on. Why is everyone struggling to write this down and using PDFs and Word docs and Dropbox folders? Like, there should be a tool for this. And so in early 2015, I released a kind of prototype of Trainual, and it was just for my clients. So, only for a couple dozen companies in the first 3 years got to experience this. But I was working hands-on with these businesses anyway. And I thought, as I'm doing this work, what if I have this proprietary tool where I can package and put all of their how-tos and all of their company knowledge. And then they would start paying me monthly, this little tiny recurring revenue after the consulting work was done. And so that's how Trainual started, was this little prototype. And so when Jonathan came along, it was, I was trying to figure out, how do I actually do something with this product that's not just for my consulting clients? And I pitched it to Jonathan as like, hey, why don't you come in, and if you can turn this into anything, I'll give you a cut of it. Like I had nothing to lose. It was like, hey, if you can write some sales messages and write some ads and make a new website, and this turns into anything, then sweet, like I'm happy for you. But as of right now, it's just this little project.
I'm curious at that point for you, Jonathan, like, as you mentioned, some of your friends like bringing up, like, why would you give up what you were doing? Like, what was the convincing point from Chris's point of view to then kind of like take that foot with Trainual, and as some of the points he mentioned?
I just didn't feel like I had anything to lose by doing it at that point. Again, I didn't necessarily think that I would be doing this long term. Like, it wasn't like whatever Chris said convinced me to like leave behind my life of an adventure athlete or whatever it was, right? I more or less just looked at it as like, well, cool, I'll spend a couple months of the winter out in Arizona with my brother, bring my wife and the dogs, and have a fun time creating some content to get this thing off the ground, and then go back to whatever I was doing. And at that time, I was speaking as like a motivational speaker, doing like leadership development and adventure facilitation for like Fortune 500 companies, where I'd go in and for a couple days I'd help them like virtually climb a mountain and make hard decisions to learn leadership skills and decision making principles and all that. So I had speaking going, I had a podcast that was scaling and taking off. I had clients, for the agency, it was called Explore Inspired, that I was doing content for and product reviews. So like for a year of basically the first year of Trainual, where I wasn't getting paid at all for Trainual, but still like doing Trainual, I was also doing like 3 or 4 other things.
We were like a client.
Yeah, exactly. And so I wasn't necessarily thinking that I was leaving the rest behind, but it just, over the course of that year, I was realizing like, where am I feeling burnt out? And where am I feeling excited, and what seems to be the biggest wave that I should ride right now? And I was having so much fun with the creative energy of working with Chris again. And I had this unique lens on creating content and advertisements and everything for Trainual, because our buyer is essentially Chris. And I know Chris better than anybody. And like, I can get into the psychology of what he cares about as a business owner and entrepreneur his whole life, as the person who like delegated everything to me. I was never good at delegating because I got delegated all the stuff. And so I knew that, like, I knew what made Chris tick. And so I was able to unpack that into all the content that would resonate with our target buyers. And it just became this fun thing we were doing together. And very evidently the wave that I needed to ride for that, this season of life.
Jonathan, can I ask you a question? When was the turning point for you that you were like, oh, I actually think I'm going to do this. Like, this is turned into something, because I remember we had all these little micro moments where we hit, however many trials in a day, or we hit like, these revenue thresholds in that first year. I know it was not until the end of the year, we won this grant in Arizona as like the, most innovative startup, and got awarded this grant money. But like, what was it, Jonathan, that pushed you over the edge to say, oh, I'm going to do this. I'm going to go all in?
It was early to mid 2018 when I realized that I could actually fulfill so many of like my creative bucket list wishes through Trainual as a marketing engine. And it was like early 2019, around that time, that we started, we went out to New York and did the 4Ds thing with Gary Vaynerchuk and his team, and started doing content with him. We did some stuff with a couple of the sharks from Shark Tank. We were cutting different fun creative together. That was like, we did a Slack integration, and I had a friend that I knew go and like set up a 200-foot slack line over Boulder Canyon to like do a stunt for us to like launch our Trainual Slack integration. And I was like, oh, wait a minute. I can like blend all of the like cool things that I'm good at naturally, of like the authentic storytelling and the like stop you in your scroll of the feed of adventure and influencer life, all of that, into like bringing big dreams to life through Trainual, and build this with my brother. And there's enterprise value here that is going to set me up more for the long term than, probably my podcast at the time. And so it was
Yeah.
kind of along there where I started thinking like, this is just really exciting and I want to put more energy here and put the rest kind of on the back burner.
Love it. In the early days there for Trainual, what would you say is that kind of the transition point for your existing clients you had to realize that this is not a nice to have, but a must have for them? You mentioned a lot of like Google Docs and Dropboxes. I'm curious, what was it about Trainual that made your clients then shift long term?
It was the companies that had some kind of growth going on, like either they had a retention issue and it was a revolving door and they were always replacing new employees. And, when you're a business owner and you offload something and then a few months later you have to jump back into that seat, it stunts your growth. And so people that, were feeling that stunted growth or, having to train and retrain and repeat themselves and show people how to do it. And then, run out of money and go back to doing it themselves and then hopefully hire someone again. Like there was this stagnant thing that they were trying to break through to grow. And then there were other businesses that were like opening a second location and wanted to perfect location number 1 so that they could copy and paste it to location number 2 and 3. Or they had hired one sales rep and it was working really well, but that person's burning out and they thought, all right, well, what if I could copy and paste like what that person is doing to person 2 and 3 and 4 and 5. And so as we saw these examples of people that were in that growth mode or breaking through that feeling like they had to do everything themselves, that got us really excited to say that Trainual is not just like a nice to have. It's a vehicle to scale your business. It is a way to offload what's working, to empower other people, to create leverage through other people's time and to scale what it is that you're trying to do. And so we saw examples of that first with my clients, but then second with just total strangers that started signing up through our Facebook ads. And that's when things really started scaling.
I'd also say that the difference between a customer that sticks with us for the long term and really gets a ton of value out of Trainual versus not are the ones that are committed to changing the way they've always done things, right? And that's the type of business that is joining, EO, Entrepreneurs Organization, or they're, going and getting an EOS implementer to help them like put a new system in place. It's these businesses that are committed to making investments to level up their organization instead of just, live on the grind of the hamster wheel, right?
They're the ones that are listening to this right now.
Exactly.
I love it. No, I mean, in those early days of Trainual, I'm curious then, what would you say were some of the marketing tactics or kind of, Jonathan, you mentioned a lot of psychology, knowing Chris, his point of view. What would you say worked for convincing those first early on customers, maybe say outside of the existing clients that you had at the time, kind of acquire new customers? What would you say worked well?
We can start pretty early here. So like at the very beginning, we turned off the website. So I did have a website and like a kind of a rough brand for Trainual, but we shut that down and turned it into kind of like a coming soon, a relaunch page with a sign up list. And we ran some really cheap, like some AdWords campaigns to point people to this website and just try to like build an email list that we could launch to. So that was very early on. Based on Jonathan and I's multimedia kind of video background, we knew we wanted to tell the story visually. So we hired a photographer that would do photo sessions with us every week to kind of just be able to tell the narrative of the startup and be able to post on social media. And that was really effective. And then we got into Facebook ads. And so with the early Facebook content, what worked for us was borrowing the authority of other brands, like books people had read or shows that they might watch on TV, and saying like, hey, if you've read this book, you probably learned X, Y, and Z, and I read it too, and here's what I did, and here's why I created this company. And so you're connecting with people in the audience over something familiar. So you get to, like Jonathan said, stop them in their scroll. And then you keep them listening long enough to say, okay, well, like what you're doing naturally relates to, I also came to that conclusion. I'm interested. And so that was the very beginning.
Yeah.
We also, with our launch party, we really heavily relied on Chris's entrepreneurial network out in Arizona and
Mm,
all the hundreds of businesses he had consulted with at that point, who maybe a handful of them had exposure to the product, but we got kind of all of them together to create a bunch of buzz around the launch. And from the very start, started an affiliate program and got some of the more influential kind of business owners in the area to be affiliates. We went hard on getting on podcasts, and Chris
mm.
probably did like 200 podcasts within the first
Wow.
3 months of the business just to like tell the story.
Yeah.
And that was just a matter of, pulling the top 200 on Apple at the time and just like fishing through their websites and trying to send the contact forms and all that. So before the ads, it was the affiliates and podcasts and just the network,
Mm,
pulling down a CSV of like our entire LinkedIn
Yeah.
portfolio, and then like sending setting up a ManyChat, or not, no, ManyChat didn't even exist. It was like a GMass
GMass.
campaign. Yeah, GMass campaign for all of our LinkedIn contacts to like let them know what was up, right? So it was like
yeah.
exhausting the network first. And then it was, like Chris mentioned, I think the very first ad that really popped was the E-Myth Revisited by Michael Gerber. It was Chris just sitting at a table, and I was shooting him holding up the E-Myth book, and him
Mm,
just saying like, yeah, there it is. It's like, if
amazing.
because we thought like, all right, if we're going out into the ad world, right? Let's not
Yeah.
educate people on on the problem. Let's just find the people who already know the problem exists in their business and now present a solution they didn't know exist. And that's what
Mm,
was cool. You've read this book on systems and processes, but it didn't give you the how. It gave you the what,
yeah.
but not the how, right? And so that was our strategy from the start.
Yeah. Love it. I mean, I've had over about 250 interviews, and I mean, already so far, the campaigns that you guys have ran is like so creative. It's mind blowing. It's really, really cool what you guys have done so far. I'm curious, what does that relationship look like when someone new, like a new company, onboards? To the listeners out there, what would that look like onboarding onto Trainual away from their conventional previous route?
It's really simple. So, first you can just go to our website and sign up for a trial and kick the tires on the product, or you can talk to one of our sales reps and do a demo and get to know the product. And then we take you through this kind of simple onboarding implementation. Again, like people that are do-it-yourselfers can jump in and just start using the tool. And I've had companies tell me that they had someone starting on Monday and they built their whole training thing over the weekend, and they were like, oh my
Mm,
gosh, I've been doing this manually every single time a new person starts. And now every
yeah.
new person I hire, I just click a button and they get all of this content asynchronously, and they watch videos and they see my screen sharing and they learn how to do the things that I do in this business. It's like a huge unlock for people. So
Mm,
we've got obviously the self-starter route. We've got almost 500 templates for people to get started with, which is the most universal things that people do in businesses. But
mhm.
yeah, you're really building out what we call your business playbook. And I put it into 4 different buckets of content. There's your company profile, which is like, what are you all about? This is your industry, your mission, vision, your values, your target customer, your stories, and your key milestones. It's like, who are you as a business?
Mm,
Then there's your people, like who else works at your company? What's the org chart like? What does everyone
yep.
do? Roles and responsibilities. What does everyone look like? Their photos and a little directory. So that's the
Mhm,
people section. Then you've got your policies, which is just the rules that you come up with. This is most often like your employee handbook, but as business owners, we get to come up with all the rules, and how often are we going to pay people, and what are our working hours, and what's the dress
mm,
code, and what do we expect of people. And then
yeah.
the final section is your processes. And that's like, what is all of the work that we do here? And step by step, how do we do each of those things so that you get
Mm,
consistent results? And so people that
incredible.
sign up for our product are, they're coming into this like ecosystem and this place that houses it all. But then they're just
Mhm,
chipping away section by section and brick by brick to kind of build that foundation of their company.
amazing. I'm curious, have you guys seen any like trends based off like industry or categories that are using Trainual? I know it's universal, but I'm curious what you're seeing.
So yeah, it is a kind of industry agnostic tool. We've got customers across the globe in pretty much every industry you could imagine. But
Yeah.
the trends that we're seeing right now is actually massive growth inside of home services. like, HVAC and roofing and electrical and plumbing and construction, general contracting, like that.
House cleaning,
Yeah,
delivery
house
services.
cleaning, like that side of things.
Yeah.
It's very obviously one of the areas that is not in the short term disrupted by AI and any kind of commoditization of knowledge workers, but it is also just booming as an industry right now. There's so much growth there, and it is one of the types of businesses that has a lot of onboarding and training of field staff, of office workers, potentially a lot of turnover, seasonality, right? And so it's just that's been a massively growing segment for us.
Yeah, it's anywhere that there's service, that there's people doing a service. When you rely on consistency, you need training. Like when your whole business relies on me doing this thing consistently and providing a great customer experience, you have to train that. And so so I think that what distinguishes companies now, what makes them stand out, is exceptional service and exceptional experiences and great people, because it's really not hard to start any kind of company in the world now. You can, find it on YouTube and figure out the basics and start that kind of company. What sets you apart is your people and your brand and your style and what makes you unique. And once you laser focus in on what that is, you need to teach all of your people to operate like that.
Yeah, that's an interesting point.
I was just going to say, it's been an interesting thing for us with seeing that growth of that segment as well, because it's required us to shift our marketing, message a little bit in that through the first few years, what worked super well, like I was describing, there are certain books, but there were also a lot of influencers that we worked with. I mentioned Gary. We're partnered with Damon John, Shark Tank, and there are all sorts of different internet influencers that we have done partnerships and ambassadorships with. That it's like the owner of an HVAC company in Tennessee, maybe not watching or following the same things, right? And so we've had to kind of shift our attention graph of understanding, well, where are they? What are they looking at? Who do they care about? We're sponsoring Dave Ramsey's show in a big way right now because he commands a lot of that audience, and so it's just required us to shift the psychographics of our marketing mix.
Yeah, for sure. No, I think I've actually seen Damon John's some of his talks around Trainual, so that's actually spot on, because I followed a lot of the people you guys are talking about. I mean, around the service business aspect, it's kind of interesting, because if I'm allowed to name a customer, let me know. If not, but your PR rep told me the Phoenix Suns, which is a really cool partnership. How did something like that come about? I'm curious, and which is 100% service business, entertainment service.
Yep.
Well, first of all, I've been a season ticket holder there. I live in Arizona, so I've been a Suns fan and season ticket holder for 7 years or something. So basically, since Trainual started, they've been my second favorite startup in the Valley. They were terrible when I got my tickets, and they've gotten better, and now they're kind of I don't know. We're struggling through a season right now, but as I was in the arena all the time, I was just meeting the different people on the team, and I kept saying, guys, I know that there's something here. We haven't traditionally served professional sporting organizations, but we have a ton of amateur organizations around the country that are just signing up on our website and using the product. And I thought, look, we've got restaurants and food trucks that use the product. We've got hotels. We've got spas and service organizations. We've got venues that use the product. We've got sports teams. If you put all that together, you get a professional sports team. And so it's you just have all the different divisions that could use this product, which gives you all the more reason to need it. And so so they actually went through a change in ownership in the last couple of years. And when the new owner came on board, he said that his mission was to be the best run team in sports, to totally overhaul their operations, to totally overhaul their culture. And all of a sudden, that new message from the top made everybody open to what I had been talking about. And so we finally got onto some demos. They liked the product, and we worked out them being a customer, but then also us being a partner of theirs to get the brand out to more businesses locally here.
Yeah. Amazing.
It's been super fun. We were able to actually just do our big first event. We had Playbook 2025, which was our first customer and wider industry conference back in November. and all of our
Mm,
VIP kind of after parties were over at the Suns Mercury Training Center and
wow.
headquarters. And yeah, it's been a really fun collaboration with them. We've got
So
another
cool.
event at the Footprint Arena for some customers in the Valley coming up in February. It's been cool.
I love it. What would you guys say is like a bet you're going to be making on the future of work that informs where like the future of Trainual would go next? I know you mentioned AI and kind of the service-based business, but what's something like the future of work that you're seeing the future of Trainual move to?
I think just sort of building on what I was saying before, I think if you don't want your business to be commoditized, you have to really invest in your brand and your personality and your story and what makes you unique. And so I think
Yeah.
getting new employees to join your company, selling them on why they should join your company is going to take really being unique with your story.
Yeah.
Making a difference in the marketplace is going to take really educating your customers and giving them a unique process that they go through. And so as long as businesses have that unique element to them, then I
Mhm.
think they're going to need what we do.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Love it.
I would say that knowledge will be a commodity from a standpoint of like every business already really has a wiki or should have a wiki, and they're building out kind of like basic documentation in Google Docs or wherever else. And um, in a very short period of time, I would see that every business basically has like a chat GPT for their business, right?
Yeah.
So where Trainual fills a gap that doesn't, though, is the onboarding and training experience, is the change management experience in your company and how the structure of
Mm,
your roles continue to grow.
interesting. Also, no worries on the noise. We can edit a lot of that background noise too, anyways. Okay. Just to wrap up here, guys, thank you so much for taking the time. But I like to conclude each episode with this. If you can share one piece of advice with an aspiring entrepreneur, maybe something you've learned or regret along the way, what would you say that would be?
I would say that you can't get where you're going by yourself. And for me, building Trainual took finding Jonathan as the other piece of this puzzle, and some of my other first employees. I think that too many people try to go it alone, and they try to
Mm,
muscle their way to success without saying, like, what is the right combination of skills that I need here? And how do I go find those people? And how do I get them to believe in what I'm doing? Jonathan worked for the first year without getting paid because he saw the bigger opportunity. And that's paid off tremendously. And
mm,
so I'm not suggesting that, everybody is going to work for free, but I am suggesting that the sooner you realize you can't do everything yourself, the
yeah.
sooner I think you can scale beyond yourself.
Mm, I love that. Jonathan, what would you say if you have something in mind?
Yeah, I'm kind of contrarian in a sense of a lot of people say you have to focus to excel, right? You really have to like pick one channel or like go after one niche or whatever, and that's just not how I live or believe like succeeds.
Mhm.
I'm more of an and not or kind of abundance person, and that's what has, I think, led to a lot of the momentum that Trainual has been able to build. There's been so many board meetings where Chris and I are presenting our strategies for the year, the quarter, and like our advisors are like, all right, that all sounds good, but like pick three things, and we're like, nope, we're going to do it all. And
Yeah.
and I think that attitude is what creates momentum. I like to say we execute at the speed of ideas. And so that's what I
Mm,
would tell everybody. It's like not everything is going to work, but the more you try, the more you can succeed. And the
I love
faster
that.
you go, the faster you will grow.
Amazing. Well, you guys, thank you so much for taking the time. And to the listeners out there, make sure to check out Trainual at trainual.com.